Hello, welcome back to the channel. Now, say you are a captain of industry, you have a lot of money to spend and you want a car which does not make you look like you're being chauffeured to an airport. What should you buy? Storm, what have you brought?
I've brought this, which is the new Mercedes EQS. This is a very important car for Mercedes, probably the most important car I think they've built in 20 years. It is their first real attempt at the luxury EV market, the first car they've built on an all-new electric-only platform. And it's their real attempt at the Tesla market. It's their Tesla killer.
Super. BMW's take on it is an SUV. It's called the iX, which is what I have brought along. So there's loads of tech in them and there's loads of user interface stuff in them too to go into. So we'll have a quick tech dive into both, then we'll study the interiors, then we'll go for a drive and see which one is best.
The Mercedes EQS is all new. It's based on a different model architecture than the regular S-Class limousine uses, and the very first that Mercedes has developed specially for an electric car. It's called the EVA platform, and depending on which particular EQS model you buy, it can give you either one drive motor or two, rear-wheel drive or all-wheel drive, and anything from 329 to 649 brake horsepower. The entry-level rear-wheel drive EQS 450 Plus is the one we've got, and it's also the EQS with the greatest claim range. Up to 487 miles is advertised for this car, depending on fitted equipment. It's got a slightly larger drive battery than the BMW, and partly because it's lower and has less frontal area, it has better aerodynamic efficiency too. Outright performance here is slower than the twin-motor BMW, although not slow in outright terms. 62 miles an hour from rest takes 6.2 seconds, and top speed is limited to 130 miles an hour. More than how quickly it can accelerate or how fast it can go on the Autobahn though, it's how far the EQS can travel before it needs to stop and recharge, which Mercedes will hope might be its chief selling point. Like the BMW, the car runs on adaptive air suspension as standard, and it also features four-wheel steering for added low-speed manoeuvrability. Our particular test car could manage up to 10 degrees of opposed rear axle steering, twice as much as many luxury cars have had previously, and definitely enough to notice from the curb when the car is turning hard at low speed.
Okay mate, welcome to the interior of the wild and crazy Mercedes of the future.
Doesn't have to be white, presumably.
You'd hope not. It's not very practical.
It's not family friendly, is it?
In a muddy car park.
No, but anyway.
January. Yeah, so are you comfortable back there?
Oh yeah, mate, it's huge. I've got a vast amount of legroom, because that's your driving position, is it?
Yeah, it is.
I've got loads of legroom and a decent amount of headroom. It feels very luxury car, luxury limo style.
It's very sort
S-Class.
of classic luxury, isn't it?
Yeah. It's
and
proper saloon luxury, do you know what I mean? Big saloon car. Yeah.
It's sort of exclusive and all that stuff.
Yeah.
So this is the hyperscreen. This is what all the fuss has been about, mate. It's 3 screens that are joined together to look like one. And even on this car, which is a top of the range EQS 450, it is another £8,000 as an optional.
And otherwise you get that plus a central.
Yeah, standard. You get your digital instruments. You get a slightly smaller central screen. This is I think nearly 18 inches diagonally. Okay. But it all works the same way. Layout's the same. So your HVAC controls are on the touchscreen. You've got a sort of a home screen with with apps to swipe left and right. That's how you navigate. And then your sort of navigation is in behind.
Got a big screen. Do those HVAC controls pretty much stay there all the time?
They don't move. Yeah.
Oh, great.
Which is
Which is something.
Well, yeah. It's also I always think why they're on a touchscreen? They might as well be physical. I suppose they're not gathering dust. So this is quite important. This is the little shortcut screen for all of your important systems. So if you get your little car icon, you can turn on the or off the lane keeping system or the parking sensors. That makes sort of it easier to navigate particular things. I find it's still a bit hard to get to other things. It's often a click back to home and then a swipe, and often it doesn't recognise the first time you try it, and then you're into settings, and then you've got to wait another menu. Oh, okay, well I need the lights. So, and if you're if you're trying to sort of adjust something pretty prosaic, like I don't know, a radio station or something, or if you're just trying to do something simple, having to do 3 or 4 different things, particularly while you're driving, is just a bit annoying.
So 2 things from here. Does that get in the way if you rest your arm on it at all?
It hasn't bothered me.
Oh, okay, good. And secondly, do you find that the buttons on the steering wheel react to the way you want them to?
I sort of don't use all of them, and I don't use them in every way. You know, you can slide the volume, can't you, for the and you can slide the traditional. I tend to try to keep things simple with them, and if I don't try to do anything too clever with them, they sort of work all right. Although, you know, it is often, it takes too much of your attention to do some of these things.
Yeah,
you know, if you want to swipe the trip computer.
I find sometimes when I swipe it will swipe the wrong way, or it won't swipe quite in the way that an actual physical button wouldn't, you know, would do what I wanted it to.
So the good news is, if it all gets a bit too much, which it can do after dark, you know, there's a lot of glare off the screens, and you've got all the ambient lighting pulsing in various different colours. You just literally hit the power button on your shortcut screen, hit the system off. You've already got the navigation set, so you're already getting your instructions for where you're going, left or right or straight on your head-up display. You've got all the information you need on the instrument screen. The rest of that is just dark. And with it all off, there's obviously that much less glare. Driving at night is just a lot easier on the eyeball. So it's a bit like, you know, driving a 90s Psalm all over again with the night panel display.
Yeah, good. Right, fine. Well, shall we jump in the BMW and see what that is like?
The iX is BMW's third pure battery electric vehicle in the company's transition towards an electric future, and the basic proportions and dimensions are similar to an X5, but this car's construction is nothing like that. There is a lightweight carbon fibre structure with a composite body, giving it greater rigidity than any other BMW, but that light structure is more than offset by the size of the battery pack. This is a 2.5 tonne car, so it has a huge battery of 105 kilowatt hours, which gives it an approximate 350 mile range, and it has a maximum fast charge speed of 200 kilowatts. In total, it's 2 electric motors, one for each end and 4-wheel drive, make 516 brake horsepower, 564 pounds-foot of torque, and in this xDrive 50M Sport specification, the iX costs £95,000 before options.
So mate, that was the Merc. This is the BMW, which is quite airy, isn't it? Quite airy and spacious.
Yeah, it is. I don't think I've got any less space back here than I had in the Merc. You know, if anything, perhaps it hasn't got that sort of limo-like sort of laid-back, recumbent. You know, that you feel like your legs are supported and you've got your pillowy headrest. It's a bit more sort of
family car.
Yeah, a bit more SUV in here, but I like it, and I like how sort of understated it is. It's a bit less chintzy than the BMW, isn't it?
Yeah, I think that's fair, mate. It's also this is what you get. This screen, you don't, the passenger doesn't get a screen of their own. It's a bit driver centric, which is quite BMW-y. I'm quite pleased. I still get latest iDrive. It's got a controller, so as well as that being a touchscreen, I've got a controller, right, which is good. I think it's got a head-up display. I can change the. So the thing is, right, the main instruments, I get a button on the wheel to change the instruments. How often am I going to change the instruments once I've decided what I want? Never. And yet, if I want to change the temperature, which I might do several times an hour because I'm fickle like that, or the heated seat, I actually have to go into a touchscreen to do it. Why is that a button and that not a button? They're not alone, BMW, but this is the sort of thing that really starts to wind me up about legacy car makers. They're trying to do stuff that is new and forgetting some of the decent ergonomic stuff that they had in the first place. But anyway, right, so big screen. Let's go to the main menu. How many?
That's a lot.
Yeah, how many apps do you think there are?
20?
36.
Wow.
So messages, so the Ring Go app, for example, is a parking app, isn't it? But that's a separate app. But then there's like country information, automate habits. I don't think, unless you're logged in with a BMW ID, which is much like an oven refusing to turn on unless you've set the time. What does it care if I'm logged in or not? Anyway, I like this because that's good. I like the fact that I can do both. That I can use the controller, but I can also use the screen if I want to. Because this is always where, do you know what I mean? If you highlight that, it's always where I left it. And if I look at the road, and then it's still at least, it's just better. It's safer, actually. There's still quite a lot of vehicle apps. There's no games, tragically.
I can live with that.
So there's two things that annoy me. One is the fact that the climate menu is buried on the touchscreen, and the other one is that the lane keeping assist is not a simple single button of its own. There's that shortcut there, but then you actually have to. You have to be really. And if you're
and
that's
default's
a really.
on, so you've got to do that every.
Yeah, and the default
time.
is on every time you get in the car, which doesn't have to be that. I know there are rules about how to turn them on. They have to default on, and they can't be a single momentary push to turn off. but that's too
That's
too
a
much
problem,
for me.
isn't it? I mean, if you're going to have to turn it off anyway, you make it easy to turn off.
Yeah.
Otherwise, it's
Because
just making
then-
the bad situation worse.
Yeah, and then you're also less likely to turn it back on when you get onto a motorway where you might want it on. That's the thing. If you make it harder to turn off, who's going to turn it back on again?
Yeah.
That's what.
I quite like this sort of home screen that they've got. You know, not the menu screen, but the one you can set it with the widgets there.
Yeah.
This is all iDrive 8,
Yeah.
and I like the sort of the customisable sort of layout of that.
I do.
Whereas that to me is just a bit blind.
This is all a bit much. Yeah, this is all a bit much. So, as a rule, then, which do we think has the better user interface?
I'm
of the two?
comfier. I'm comfier with this one.
Yeah, me too.
I think the other one, I'm at my happiest when I found the button how to turn it all off.
Yeah, agreed. All right, so that is that. We'll go for a drive and see how they handle on the road. Okay, so the BMW on the move. I have turned on one of the noise things, so it makes a little hum in the background. Otherwise, it just sounds like any other EV, which is not very loud at all. Because the drivetrain is perfectly smooth. There is one gear. It rolls away from a standstill, always has a little bit of creep like an automatic as you come off the brake. And then it's just really smooth and really nice all the way through. Very relaxed. The interesting thing about this car is that it is unbelievably isolated from the road. Like really, really well. This was running 21, 22-inch wheels, I think. But even so, it's really well isolated from the road. The ride quality, especially on a motorway, is really good. You'll see sort of expansion joints come up on the motorway and you think, well, that's just going to go da-dunk, da-dunk and thunk through or something like that. But it doesn't. It's, I think, in terms of new cars, the only other vehicles that are as removed from this are true luxury stuff like a Rolls-Royce Ghost and things like that. It's really, really smooth riding. Really
This unfortunately only works during active route guidance.
I think you can turn off voice control because if you have the misfortune to call the car by its name, it tries to solve the problem for you. It says, why? Why did you ask for me? It's like, you know, when you're sort of listening in the background and you hear your name being mentioned, you say, what was that? What are they talking about? It does that to you, which is quite irritating. Anyway, ride control, it's very well damped, it's very well controlled, it's very well removed from the road. It is quite a tall car. I think it's quite as tall as some of the, you know, the bigger SUVs and things. There's a little bit of body roll and body lean. The steering is sort of quite light, it's very responsive, it never takes on any extra feel or weight or anything like that, so it doesn't drive like a traditional BMW, this car. In a traditional BMW, I think there's more sort of a stronger build-up of weight off straight ahead, whereas this, you know, changes direction very quickly. But it is quite enjoyable, it's quite engaging, and for a big car, for a tall car, it is surprisingly agile and dynamic. So while I think the Mercedes behaves a bit more like an old-fashioned Mercedes saloon in the way it drives, this behaves like something else, something new, more like one of BMW's i models, which, you know, like the i3 is almost like a big i3 rather than a 4 Series or a 3 Series or a 7 Series. And that's all right. You know, actually that is okay. It is something different, it's something new. I'm not necessarily convinced that if you want an EV, you have to want a new type of BMW. I think an old type of BMW has quite a lot to offer still, and an old type of BMW with a new powertrain would be good enough. But this is a cool thing, and I like driving it a great deal, and I also think the user interface is better than the one in a Mercedes. So I think this car has rather a lot going for it.
It's very quiet in here, isn't it? This is the electric Mercedes of the future. And if you don't want it to be absolutely quiet, you don't need it to be, you can choose a noise for it. We'll come to that in a minute, but it's definitely playing on the classic refined limousine thing. There's a lot about this car that's quite classic Mercedes, and there's quite a lot about it that's quite sort of futuristic science fiction, and it's trying to sort of balance the two. It's a bit of a tricky brief, that. But yeah, so the noise is where we'll start. This is just your standard noiseless EQS. This is as quiet as it gets. If you like, you can have what they call the sound experience on, and this one is called Silver Waves. Have a listen to this. Just sounds a bit V6-y perhaps, but you know, quite engine-y, quite normal. It's a noise. It's all right. Inoffensive. The next one is called Vivid Flux. That's just a little introductory noise it does. That's a bit more spaceshipy, a bit more unusual. Sort of slightly out of phase with the pedal input. It sort of comes after you expect it to. And the last one is called Roaring Pulse. Now, by the sounds of that ought to be the sporty one. Let's see if that's how it sounds. Yeah, that's a bit more kind of bassy V80, throbby. Anyway, I think if it was mine, I would just turn it off, because what's the point of an electric limousine if it isn't quiet? This is the EQS 450. It's just under 330 horsepower, just I think over 420 pounds-foot. And because it's a 2.4 ton car, you might think, oh well, that's nothing. My shopping trolley's faster than that. But this car has all the roll-on performance that you need. Picks up really nicely. It's quicker than any conventional limousine I can remember driving, and it's really easy to drive as well, really drivable. The power's right on tap when you need it. And if you're the chauffeur just looking to make your patron in the back seats relaxed and at his ease, well, you'd have no trouble at all. This car is definitely trying to feel classic limousine. It's trying to feel soft, a little bit softy-wafty, a little bit old school limo. There's not many big saloons like that anymore. It's not so fashionable to make your big, comfy saloon car waft along quite like a big Mercedes does, quite like this car does. And maybe you might like that about it. It's still a pretty traditional car dynamically. It's great on the motorway. It's great around town. When you find a sort of a slightly bumpy road, you do find the ride becomes a bit noisier. This car is a range-topping trim level, so it's an exclusive luxury, and it's got 22-inch wheels, and I think you can probably just hear it, and you can certainly feel it when you hit a bump. It's maybe not quite as well isolated as the ride in the BMW, which is interesting, because maybe you'd think the Mercedes ought to be the more comfortable car of the two, the better isolated. I think it's the other way around. But we're talking pretty small degrees of differentiation here. This is still a very comfy car, and if as long as you don't drive it along at some ridiculous speed, it's very comfortable. It just wafts along, soothes the bumps away, moves around a little bit, but generally only enough to let you know that it's interested in your comfort. And having done all that, it then handles really quite well for such a big car. It's got this advanced four-wheel steering system that will do up to 10 degrees of rear steer, which is probably twice as much as the BMW will do, and that makes it feel really agile and wieldy in the slower corners, and also when it's manoeuvring, when it's going around junctions and roundabouts and getting around car parks. For a big car, this car is incredibly good at all of that, and it'll also turn around in the road in a heartbeat, in a junction. When you think about how barge-like limousines used to feel, you just wouldn't recognise any of that in this car. It really feels like a different prospect. It's a strangely rational car, this, for something that costs £100,000. In some ways, it's a strangely rational thing. The way it looks is defined because that's aerodynamic. It might as well have been designed by the wind. And the way it is on the inside is all about the technology that it has. It's all about the time that we're in and what our obsessions are. Mercedes wants you to feel like you're driving a bit of the future here, clearly. And you do feel like that. But maybe you're not as at ease as you might be in something that was just a bit more homely, a bit more welcoming and a bit more normal. It wasn't broadcasting high-definition video at you from every surface, and didn't want to convince you that it was Buck Rogers' space capsule, because it's a bit lower, a bit more aerodynamic and efficient, and it's only got one motor rather than two, and it's a bit less powerful. Because of all of that, this is a car with an advertised range of getting on for 450 miles, which is quite a lot, even for a 100 grand electric car. In the real world, I think you'd probably see somewhere between 350 and 380 miles, maybe 400 if you really eked it out, which is, well, it's more than the BMW. The BMW, because it's bigger and bluffer and squarer and heavier and more powerful, probably only going to give you between sort of 260 and 280, 290 miles. And the difference there isn't huge, but in the context the electric car now finds itself, in that sort of, time is luxury context where you want to be freed from the shackles that constrain other electric cars, i.e. the charging of them. You don't want to have to stop another time on your long road trip, or you don't want to have to, charge on your way home, or you only want to have to do it, plug it in, twice a week rather than 3 times. Whatever that is, however that translates into your life, this car gives you probably 20% more range and associated freedom than the other one. Now, maybe that is the most important luxury that the EQS can give you.
Ultimately, what we've got here is 2 different philosophies at work. Now, which is the better car? Arguably, depends on what you're looking for. The Mercedes is a hatchback, but is actually a traditional old-school luxury-style limousine. The iX is more informal, laid back and with a world-class ride quality and a more functional user experience. That makes the iX our choice, but if you feel differently, we'd quite understand. Now, there's more on these 2 in the magazine and over at autocar.co.uk. Thanks very much for joining us. More news and reviews next time.